we would be willing to pay the entire year up front, one giant lump sum for the entire year to show that we're good tenants who are actually going to meet our obligations. How's it going, guys? It's everybody's favorite, least consistent uploading YouTuber, your boy Millennial Mike from Seattle. Today I want to talk about when it's okay to actually accept a giant lump sum payment from a tenant. So most YouTube channels that you probably follow about landlording and about how to manage properties and how to invest in real estate will tell you, hey, be very extremely careful and cautious of individuals who come at you and flash cash. That person may be thinking to themselves, you know what, if I just pay 4 months now and I live in a state where it takes 6 months to get evicted, I can pay 4 months now up front and then never pay again and live for 6 months for free. And then when I finally get evicted, the day before the sheriff shows up, I will hightail it out of there, never to be seen again, off into the sunset. I'm sure if, like me, you've spent a decent amount of time on YouTube, you've probably seen a horror story laid out by somebody exactly like that. Well, one of the things they tell you to do is to avoid people flashing you cash up front. Do your due diligence, the background check, the eviction checks, the income verification, the past housing verification, where they've lived before. And also make sure that they are capable, either via a good credit score or however you determine that you want to make the deciding decision on whether or not they're capable of. Try to figure out if they're actually capable of paying the rent that you're charging them. And in my case here at $2,150 a month, that's a hefty down payment every month you got to make to live here. So I want to actually make sure you're capable of doing it. But in this case, I had something unique happen when I listed this place for rent. Now, I listed it for rent, and within 2 days, I had about 30 different responses from people saying, we want to see it. I showed it about 15 times over 2 nights, over like literally a 24-hour period, one evening and the next evening, and got 6 or 7 applications back, and I eventually had to just start turning people away because I pretty much had who I thought was going to rent for me anyways. So what I had was something that I hadn't experienced before. I had a group of individuals who said they wanted to rent from me, but because they were recent college graduates, they didn't think that they had good enough credit to be able to actually pass my credit check or my income verification. Now, I don't turn anybody away, at least have a conversation with them. So it turned out that these individuals had just graduated nursing school and moved from about 2 hours away to were wanting to move from about 2 hours away to where I'm at for their new job that was starting literally like 4 days after I showed them the property. So what they told me was we would be willing to pay the entire year up front, one giant lump sum for the entire year to show that we're good tenants who are actually going to meet our obligations. Now, immediately for me, and I think for you, you should be saying to yourself, well, there's a few warning signs here because I know I shouldn't be letting people flash cash. I shouldn't be doing that. But at the back of my head, I said, okay, this is a little bit different than somebody flashing 3 months of rent for a 12-month lease. This is someone flashing 12 months of rent for a 12-month lease. The whole point of running credit checks and income verification is to make sure they can actually pay the rent each month. But if they already paid all 12 months worth of rent up front plus a security deposit, what's my risk? Now, this is where it's extremely important to actually have a good network. Because the very first thing that I did was call someone who's way more experienced, way smarter, and has been doing this a lot longer than myself. So if you remember back on my channel a few months ago, I had a friend of mine, his name is Jim. He's a real estate agent both in Washington and in Arizona. He's a really good guy. He owns several duplexes here in the Washington area, recently sold his house up in Lake Stevens, and now lives down in Arizona in a beautiful home. He's the pro in my area. Now, I have a lot of different pros that I could go to, people who I could get information from, but I figured it would be smartest to turn to somebody who lived locally and may know if there's some Washington state specific laws or considerations that I need to take into account to make sure that I don't get hemmed up here. So I gave him a phone call and I began to speak with him, and I asked him to make a video explaining, because he has a YouTube channel which I'll put in the description down below. Look for that. He's a great guy and you should follow him. I asked him to make a video so I could cite it here, and he hasn't done it yet. But what he told me was essentially what I'm kind of saying to you. Well, shoot, it's a game changer, literally his words, it's a game changer when somebody offers to pay an entire year up front. He also told me, what does my gut tell me? You've met him, what do you feel? He said that he always goes with his gut, which is actually a little bit different than some of the channels I've heard. Some of them would say, hey, sometimes people seem great. You get their background check back and they're garbage. Now, Jim may be a little bit more talented after freaking 30, 40 years of doing this than your average newbie guy. And maybe his gut is a little bit more in tune with reality than potentially just an average Joe. So I'll give him that advantage. But he said, what does your gut tell you? And I'm like, well, look, you know, they're nursing students recently graduated. You know, they don't seem to be deadbeats to me. I mean, it takes a considerable amount of effort and work and intelligence to become a nurse. These are the types of people who usually care about something like an eviction going on their record if they end up trashing the place and have to kick them out. So he was like, well, okay, your gut checks out. They're paying all the money up front. He said, and again, his words, not mine, he's like, you know what, I'd take that risk. I'd take that bet. So I gave him a phone call back and we talked about how we were going to do it. And I asked him, you know, like, what do you think? Do you think we need to do a escrow account or something like that? And he said, you know, if they're going to just give you a check, throw it in a bank account every month, move over what that month's rent is every single month into your whatever account you manage your normal rental properties out of, call it good. So that's exactly what I did. I used Chase Bank. I went online. I opened up a new checking account. They sent me a check. And this is a copy of the check that I have cut out the routing number and account numbers and blacked out the people's names. So don't think about doing any fancy work. But here, right here, you can see right here, we're at 20. I don't know if that's going to zoom in, and it's probably reversed. $26,498. That was $2,150 times 11 for 11 months, plus the partial month of August that they paid, plus a $1,600 deposit. Came to a total of $26,498.30 that they moneyed up for in a cashier's check. Sent it my way. I put it in the bank, and after 3 or 4 days of sitting there saying, well, they seem honest, it cleared, and now I can go on my mobile app, and well, there you go, there it is. So really the moral of this video was to explain to you a situation where you may consider taking a lump sum of cash up front. And I've got one more situation. My property manager in Indiana rented out one of my houses to somebody who is a student, currently enrolled as a student. And I guess the way that it works there is that every 3 months they get a large lump sum payment in the form of student aid. And so they told my property manager, who vetted them, and whatever processes she uses is completely different than me. I'm not exactly sure what the process is, but she's done a great job of finding me tenants. So I just take her recommendations. And she said, look, we can verify that they're in school. We can verify that they're getting income through student aid. They seem to be good people with no evictions, no issues. So what they want to do is they just want to pay 3 months at a time. Now, if I was in their shoes, personally, I would just probably keep the money and pay 1 month out of a time out of my own bank account. But for whatever reason, that's not what they want to do. They want to pay 3 months at a time. And so far, we're now coming up on their third installment for what will now be months 7, 8, and 9 of them living there. I've never had any problems collecting the rent. They pay on time. It comes in. So the expertise of, again, my network, my property manager, my manager out in Indiana, of her saying they pass all the rest of the checks, let's go ahead and move forward with it, has left me to be happy with no issues out there. And then my own intuition here, as well as, of course, always, I recommend this probably for anything you do that you haven't done before, confer with someone who is wiser than you, smarter than you, more experienced than you. Jim, thanks for your help. I appreciate it. Again, $26,000 check to show for it. Obviously, I don't have access to all of that. I do, but I'm not claiming access to all of that this year for tax purposes. That was my other major concern. If I take $26,000 this calendar year, I don't want to lose the ability to claim the portion of that next year that would be paying for next year when my interest payments, my interest for my payments on my duplex can knock that income down so that I'm not having to pay tax on it. And he said, look, just don't declare it all this year. Don't declare it all. Put it in a bank account. Only take out what actually goes for each month, and just don't declare the rest of it. So, all right, fair enough. Sounds good to me. So that's the path that I'm taking moving forward. So far, I'm happy to say, obviously, it's a little unique. It's a little different. I live in a wild, crazy place here in the Seattle area where units and apartments and houses go so quickly and people bid them up $100,000 over asking. People freaking do crazy things on apartments or duplexes like mine and say, you know what, we'll pay you an entire year's worth of rent up front, day one, no questions asked. Nice to meet you. Thank you, sir. And it's just a wild time out here. So quick question for you down in the comments below. If you manage your own properties, or you have a property manager who manages your own properties, have you ever accepted cash up front and had it burn you? I want to hear your story. Or have you ever accepted cash up front and not had it burn you? And if so, what was the reason? Were they getting paid under the table via family, or what was the scenario that you didn't get toasted on? Hopefully, like I won't get toasted on here. Guys, appreciate you as always for watching the video. Hopefully it's beneficial. Consider liking if you enjoy my content. If you want to support me, it would be greatly appreciated because these do take a lot of time. So just hit subscribe, hit like, click the notification bell.